Good morning, everyone. And thanks again to Patrick and Katja for having us here. You'll notice that I don't have a jacket on, which means that based on Patrick's wardrobe segregation from earlier, if you have a jacket on, I'll probably hit you up later for some funding for what we're doing, which is what I'm going to tell you about now. Now, the title of the presentation was Bootstrapping to Investing in Frontier Markets, and I sat down with the team and said, well, what should we present at Wild Digital? And we thought we'd take a slightly different slant. And everyone loves a list, right? So we do a lot of stuff in frontier markets. I'll tell you a little bit about frontier markets. But then I want to give you a list of the 9 coolest things we've found out, or we've figured out, or we've discovered when we go into these frontier markets. Now, to give that context, I am going to tell you a little bit about us. So Frontier Digital Ventures is not as sexy as that last video, or as exciting as Mark Britt's way of taking content through iFlix around the world. We have a really fundamentally simple business model that we love. We love online classifieds. We've been doing it for a long time. We've done it in developed markets. We've done it in emerging markets. And now we're doing it based in here from KL in frontier markets. So our philosophy is fairly simple. We look for entrepreneurs. We look for A-grade entrepreneurs in frontier markets. And then we back them in to build and grow online classifieds businesses. So think of iProperty, CarList, or REA Car Sales, those types of businesses. But we choose to do it in parts of the world that we think have a lot of potential. So Frontier does 3 things. We look for, as I said, we look for outstanding entrepreneurs, a number of whom are here today. We actually have Brian, who's flown in from Maputo in Mozambique. So we welcome Brian from Mozambique. We have Kelvin, who's flown in from Accra in Ghana, is one of our partners. We have our guys here from Myanmar who have flown in for the conference. So we've got a bit of a collection of some of our partners that we've found around the world. We find these guys, we get to know them, we offer them a bit of funding, we help them with a bit of strategy, but we also help them grow their business. So we just love online classifieds. Why do we love online classifieds? Really, really simple. It just works really well, and it works in most parts of the world really, really well. And if you look at the really good online classifieds businesses, if you're really good at it and you can develop a market leadership position, they can be really great businesses to run. So we've taken a very simple model that has worked in a lot of places, and we've simply rolled it out into markets that we think it still has the potential to work in. Just in terms of my background, or our background, we've been in online classifieds for a very long time. In fact, I started working for Trader.com in 1998, which is kind of like last century. Then I went to work for these guys, who you're probably familiar with. When I started with these guys, 2001, REA had, I think, $5 million in revenue, and I think there's probably some REA people in the audience that'll tell you it's something like $600 million today. And that business spawned a whole lot of other online classifieds businesses around the world. And of course, this was this online classifieds model working really, really well in developed countries. We then looked a bit further afield, and in about 2009, I joined this company, which is iProperty, which Luke and Patrick, as you know, or the Catcher Group founded back in 2007. Now, this company, its share price was 10 cents. I think it recently sold for $4. So this has been a fantastic example of how this online classifieds model has found its way out of developed countries into emerging markets. And this has, of course, been focused on online property. And then about 3 years ago here in Southeast Asia, again, along with the Catcher guys and Mark Britt and 1 or 2 others, we started doing automotive classifieds. So we thought property classifieds works in developed countries, auto classifieds works in developed countries. This business 3 years later is now worth about $200 million as well. So when you get it right, these are really great businesses. So that's why we like them. So we thought to ourselves, if it worked in developed countries, it worked in emerging markets, well, why can't it work in what we call frontier markets? So this is the world according to Frontier Digital Ventures. These are the countries sort of shaded in blue are the ones we look at. So a lot of Africa, South Asia, Central America. Probably the critical thing when you look at this data is not so much the internet users, but the mobile subscribers. So we don't look at markets and look for people who use the internet. We look for people who have a smartphone, and it's as simple as that. So we're really about mobile-driven markets, and you can see huge populations dotted across those 4 segments. So South Asia, with the exclusion of India, lots of Africa, Central America, and some Middle East and North Africa. They're the markets that we focus on. So this is us today. So we started out about 2 years ago, and over the last 2 years, we've built up, I guess, a list of partners. We have 15 partners now that cover about 19 countries around the world. So we've now got a presence in 19 markets doing 2 very simple things: online property and online automotive. So it's a very simple business. So that's us, right? So that was 5 minutes. So you've got the Frontier Digital Ventures pitch now, but I thought more interesting to say, what are some of the things that we've found out in these frontier markets that have been really interesting, that have differed quite significantly from some of the developed countries? So we had a bit of a session internally, and I think we came up with a list of about 20 things that when we went into these frontier markets, we kind of went, oh shit, this is quite different. We sort of boiled it down to 9. Then I think we had a vote internally, and as CEO, I exercised my executive veto and just chose my 9. So here's the 9 things we learned. I know that this whole conference is about disruption, and I know that REA disrupted print. I know that car sales disrupted print. iProperty disrupted print. Probably the thing that we've learned as we've gone into markets which are really not that formed is that we don't consider ourselves disruptors as much as we do consider ourselves enablers. So we go into a country where there is no market. And some of the guys, Brian in Mozambique, for example, he has created a market in which people can now advertise their properties on a website. Consumers can come to a website, they can generate a lead, and he makes money from an ad. So he's not disrupted anything. We tend to take a contrarian view where we say we've actually enabled people to do something that wasn't there before. And it's all from their mobile phone. So very few people have desktop computers, for example. So we don't feel like we're crushing or collapsing or damaging anything necessarily. We're not Uber killing the taxi industry. We kind of see ourselves as creating stuff and creating opportunities for people to access the internet and to buy cars or sell cars or buy a house or sell a house online, which is pretty cool from our perspective. One of the other things that we've learned is in most of these markets that you saw shaded blue on the map, it'd be fair to say there are no rules. There's not great legislative environments, there's not a lot of regulation, so you pretty much, I won't say you make up your own rules, but you are the rules. So in a lot of cases, you can do things, you can try things without being bound by necessarily history or what came before you or what someone says you have to do. And it goes back to the point about creating something or enabling something where you basically are the rules. So you're not constrained by anyone, and you can try new things really quickly. For example, we have a business in Pakistan, Pak Wheels, which is an auto site. They've recently launched a service that for $20, they'll send a mechanic out to your house. They'll do a 164-point check of your car. They'll verify it. They'll put it on the site for you, and it helps you sell the car. And it's called CarSure, and it's as simple as that. Now, they trialed that in one day, figured out that it worked, kept going. Auto site in Morocco started selling test drives. So rather than selling leads or charging for ads, they put a little button for Renault, who were promoting a new car, and they simply sold to Renault test drives. So they got someone to register and charged Renault every time they sent them a consumer to test drive one of their new cars. So you can try stuff as quickly as you like, which is pretty cool. This is probably one of the real cool things about living in frontier markets or operating in frontier markets. So if you're from Europe, for example, or North America, you're probably in this category of pretty stagnant economic growth. 1%, maybe 1.5%. We've seen emerging markets over the last 5 years slow down. I noted that Brazil actually shrunk by 4% last year. China has slowed down. Southeast Asia is slowing down. So we say, hey, there's these other group of countries out there that are growing at twice the rate of emerging markets. For example, and you might kind of scoff when I say that Ethiopia, which is a country of 90 million people, has grown at 10% per year for the last 5 years in a row. So that economy has increased by more than half its size in the last 4 years. So that's one of the reasons we love these countries. All you have to do is be there, be smart, and you're looking at growth rates of 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10% versus trying to squeeze the online classifieds lemon in a market that's growing at 1 or 2%. So this is an important thing for us. Number 6, and I should say these are not in some sort of hierarchical order. In keeping with frontier randomness, it's just a list of 9, so don't expect a big reveal at number 1. Online transactions. So typically online classifieds is where someone puts an ad on your website, someone looks at the ad, and if you're running the website, you charge the person who has placed the ad. It's very simple and it works really well. What we're finding in frontier markets is that a lot of our partners have leapfrogged that completely. So we've just invested in a business in Nigeria, which is 180 million people. It's a property portal, and they have leapfrogged the whole ad game. They don't charge for ads. They take 40% of the commission once the property is rented or sold. So rather than charge for an ad, they've said, don't worry about that. We're going to go straight to commission, and they're charging commission. Our partner in Pakistan, Zameen, last month sold about 70 brand new properties on their website and charged 2% commission. So these guys are now doing stuff that you can't do in developed countries, that's difficult to do in emerging markets, but because there are no rules, there's no precedent, you're making up the rules, you're forming the market, you can kind of do what you want. So a number of our partners have said, you know what, I can make $10 selling ads, I can make $100 if I take a cut of the success fee of the product that I'm actually selling. So they're selling ads, but they're generating leads for advertisers, which ultimately is generating the sale of a car or the sale of a house. So these guys have said, stuff it, I'm going to go straight to the commission model. And they are, and it's working really well. Number 5, and this is probably quite a simple observation, but what we've found is that people talk about early mover advantage and being quick and nimble. In frontier markets, it's actually real. And I'll use Brian because he's here as an example. Brian is a South African expat, went to Mozambique for a holiday one weekend, discovered that there was no real online sort of platforms for property or cars. So he said, you know what, I'm going to stay and start one. So there is a clear advantage if you're brave enough, and if you want to go into these markets and you want to build a lead, you can actually build a good business. And the funny thing about online classifieds is that my theory is you often finish where you start. So if you start out and you build a lead early in the market, it's your market to lose. So a lot of times the guy who has the number 1 position very early in an online classifieds market will be the guy who wins ultimately down the track and does very well in that market. It's very, very difficult in online classifieds if you're a number 1 to be overtaken. So if you're brave enough to go early and you want to move and you want to do the hard work and the hard yards, and we love that in our entrepreneurs that we partner with, then you can really build a market-leading business. Getting down to number 4, people talk about mobile-first markets. Where we operate, a lot of our markets are mobile-only. So people don't have MacBooks, people don't have desktops. If they do, they're at work. Very rarely would they have one at home, but what they do have is a $100 Chinese-made smartphone. So if you look at some of these are the user stats, which are available publicly, so I'm not breaking any rules by telling you this, but our partner in Tanzania, for example, 96% of the people looking at their product are using the app or the mobile version. So they've only got 4 in every 100 people actually looking at the desktop version. But the funny thing is, they still spend more time thinking about the bloody desktop version than they do the mobile version. But maybe a better example, and they're here today, is the guys in Myanmar, and I hope I've got this right because they're here. Roughly 95% of their traffic is to their mobile or app. And those guys develop purely mobile product. And it just so happens to fit the desktop browser, but they are purely mobile driven. Now I can tell you in Myanmar last year, and I think this is roughly right, again it's a frontier market so I can make up the rules and you don't know any different, but there was roughly a 50% year-on-year growth in mobile subscriptions. So imagine that. Half the market got a mobile in 1 year. So it's no surprise to see that these markets are not desktop-driven, they're not tablet-driven, they are purely mobile markets. And that gives great penetration for these businesses. Getting down to number 3, again, these are frontier markets. So the biggest thing that these markets lack is trust. No one trusts anyone. So if I'm buying your car, I think you're ripping me off. If I'm selling you my car, I think you're going to try and rip me off. So what happens is no one trusts anyone. The advantage that some of our partners have managed to figure out is to build a brand that people trust. So for example, in Pakistan again, no one trusts anyone when they're buying or selling a car, but what they do trust is packwheels.com, which is the website. So more and more people now want to buy and sell their car through the website. So it's not just an ad platform, it's actually become a central point in the absence of legislation, in the absence of regulation, in the absence of consumer protection laws. People now trust the website, and they trust the website more than they trust the government in most cases. So these guys have actually got this really unique proposition where they are the market. So they're not just a platform, they're not just a website, they're actually the market. And that's where people go to buy and sell cars. And that's why they can jump straight to things like commission models versus just advertising, because they are the market. Getting down to number 2. This is probably an obvious observation, but we have just been absolutely blown away by the extent to which social media has given people access to the internet in frontier markets. When we look at the traffic that comes to the websites of our partners, the volume of traffic that comes from Facebook or social media, proportionately speaking, is way in excess of where it is in developed or emerging markets. So a lot of the telco companies will sell plans which give you, say, 5 websites to look at. So you'll get a data plan and you can access 5 or 6 websites, one of which is obviously Facebook. So a lot of our partners find themselves using Facebook as a really significant channel for their business, and it's almost become the conduit to get people online. So imagine you've got a $100 Chinese-made phone, there's no rules or regulations, there's a brand you trust, and you can access it via social media. And the social media stats in the countries in which we operate are absolutely off the charts. Number 1, and I think this is the most important one, and I know my time is up, is that when we go out into these countries, we primarily look for really good entrepreneurs who are passionate, who have a great idea and need help to implement it, operate it, and execute it. So in all of our markets, we've been absolutely blown away by some of the quality of the people that we get to do business with and partner with. I mean, there's a guy who runs our business in Central America, which is basically a classifieds business that covers from the border of Mexico down to Colombia. His name's Boris, he's from Switzerland. He would be, and for those in the internet sort of industry, he would be the best manager of paid traffic campaigns I've ever met in the 18 years I've been involved in the internet. So this is a random guy running a business in Central America that manages paid traffic better than anyone I've ever met. The guys here today running Cars DB, outstanding group of 3 young guys, incredibly smart, who are doing a great job running their business in Myanmar. And this goes for a lot of the entrepreneurs that we've met across the group as well. Kelvin and his 2 partners in Ghana. You go there and these are 3 young, passionate, committed, motivated guys who know that this is their number 1 thing in life. And for us, it's an absolute pleasure when we get to work with these guys. So our model is a little bit different to some others that tend to centralise and try and run things centrally. We always partner with local entrepreneurs, and we've been so lucky to come across these guys who have been outstanding operators as well. So that was probably one of the other observations. So that's who we are, that's what we do. I'll be around obviously for the next couple of days, and feel free to tap me on the shoulder if you want to have a chat about anything that's happening in frontier markets. Thank you.